Welcome again. Today we're going to go for next hour and a half in the workshop. Uh, Feel free to eat lunch. Enjoy that. Many of you are taking a lunch break, so happy you're here. But we've got three really rock star speakers today, and then we'll have a Q&A, save Q&A for the end of the presentations. We'll kick off with a welcome and introductions, and then I'll turn it over to our colleague Claudette Ayanaba with Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance to go over Energy Efficiency 101. Then turn it over to Charlotte Cohn with ACEEE, that's American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, to talk more specifically about zoom in, what does energy efficiency look like in Florida? And then we'll turn it over to George Cavros with Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, who is the man with a plan on the Florida Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. He has been engaging on that, on rules making under that legislation for the last few years. And so really excited to have George here and our expert today. For the last 15 minutes or so of the workshop, we'll stop recording and do a Q&A, take the slides off and look at each one another on the Zoom and have a discussion about, answer any questions. Would love to get your thoughts, but we'll stop recording for the Q&A at the end. Sound good? Okay, so what next slide, Amani? Just really quickly, only the presenters will have the video and voice during the presentation. And as I mentioned, we'll do Q&A at the end. If you look to the right of your Zoom, where it says more, the triple dot, you can raise your hand when we get to the Q&A portion, and there's directions visualized there. But you also feel free to type questions along the way, and we'll keep track of them and circle back at the end, or just save them to the end. With that, we'll turn next slide, Amani, please. I'm going to give you a quick bio real quick of our three speakers. First up, Claudette Ayanaba is a policy manager with Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance. As a member of the policy team, she works on finding ways to provide research, technical assistance, and engagement to help stakeholders make smart, informed, energy-related decisions and advance energy efficiency in the region, in the Southeast. She previously worked as a rural and state plan writer with the state of Georgia's Environmental Protection Division, Air Protection Branch, and I had the pleasure of working with her in that role. Although her career has been in environmental engineering, her bachelor degrees are in physics in Spelman College and mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. She also holds a master's degree in environmental planning and management from Johns Hopkins University. Her passions include her daughters reading, hiking, teaching, making connections, policy design, and trying to figure out how to fit it all into 12 hours. After Claudette, we'll have Charlotte with us, and Charlotte is a research analyst with ACEEE, American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. They're a leading think tank in the nation on energy efficiency policy and technical implementation. Charlotte conducts research and analysis on utility energy efficiency policy in particular. Prior to joining ACEEE, she worked with the Vermont Law School Institute for Energy and the Environment on building community solar projects for low and moderate income communities in New Hampshire, which combined access to solar energy with energy efficiency education services in order to maximize the impact of clean energy. Additionally, she was a residential solar energy consultant in Massachusetts and has worked with customers to control their home energy use by installing solar systems. She holds a master's in energy regulation and law from the Vermont Law School and a bachelor's degree from the University of Vermont. She joined ACEEE in 2020. And finally, we have George Cavros. George joined Southern Alliance for Clean Energy in April 2013. His focus is on advocating for state policies that sustainably ramp up energy efficiency programs by Florida's power companies, and that encourage meaningful renewable energy development in the state. He oversees SACE's work in Florida and serves as the organization's legal counsel in the state. George worked with SACE as a consulting attorney for 6 years prior to joining the staff full time. He previously worked as a Florida representative for the National Environmental Trust on campaigns to defeat attempts to weaken landmark federal environmental laws and worked to promote federal policy that addressed the challenge of climate change. Prior to that, he clerked with the US EPA Stationary Air Enforcement Division. He's also active in the South Florida community and serves as a Broward County Climate Change Task Force. He earned his JD with honors from Nova Southeastern University's Shepherd Broad Law Center, and he also enjoys work as an adjunct professor of energy law. So that is our rock star cast of presenters that we've got today. We again want to thank our speakers for agreeing to join and put together robust presentations. These presentations are really great. I had a chance to look at them before we got started today. And with that, we'll turn it over to Claudette.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you for the invitation. Hello, everyone. I am going to start sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen and hear me? Great. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I am going to go through the first set of slides that talk about SEEA and what we do, but in general, I just want you to know that we promote energy efficiency in our 11-state Southeast state region. Here are our areas of work, why we believe in energy efficiency and why it matters, our values. So I'm going to give an overview of energy efficiency. It's not Florida specific, but it's definitely an overview of energy efficiency policy in the Southeast. So hopefully I can set the stage for our next expert panelists to give you a deeper dive into Florida policy in Florida. So let's start with a basic example of using the light bulb example. Many people probably remember as a child being told, turn off the lights here. When you leave a room, turn off the lights. So that is essentially energy conservation. This is different than energy efficiency, where you see here, the light bulb has evolved to be less expensive and it lasts longer, a longer period of time. And that is energy efficiency. Whereas when you're talking about energy conservation, this is the absolute reduction of use. Here's another example of a technology, and that's our refrigerator. So as refrigerator throughout time, the size of refrigerators has grown, but the price and the energy consumption of that refrigerator in relation to the size has actually decreased. Just a little bit about the electric system. So we have our generation, transmission, and distribution. So when I'm talking about the supply side, that's the generation. And then we have the demand side, or the distribution, how it's delivered to homes and businesses. So that's where we're managing the demand. And typically we have summer load to represent the demand on the electric system. We have the summer load curve, and then we have a winter load curve. And it changes depending on the time of day. And then as you see, depending on whether it's the winter months or the summer months. So for many years, this load curve could explain the demand on the system and was fairly predictable. But our habits and technologies are slowly changing and evolving. And as you see in the house, this is the house of the quote unquote house of the future, there are many different technologies that are in the house and that are available for homeowners, and also homeowner habits are changing. So our load profiles of the future are not going to look like the traditional ones. Managing the changes in demand is becoming increasingly more complex and variable. So utilities are increasingly more aware, or need to be more aware of the changes. And then they have to adjust the generation that is being supplied. One way to do that is through load management or demand response. So going back to our definitions, using the example of a hot water heater, we have energy efficiency, which can be a rebate where you buy a more efficient model of your hot water heater. Turning off your hot water heater during certain times of the day, that would be energy conservation. Then demand response is where you sign up for a time of use rate to reduce the energy use during those peak electricity demands when everybody might be using their air conditioner, such as a very hot day like today. And then demand load, direct load control is where the utility controls the hot water heater by placing a switch on that hot water heater and adjust the use depending on peak demand. Here is a list of different energy efficiency and demand side management programs that are found at different utilities around the country. You might see some that are familiar, such as appliance standards, getting Energy Star appliances. You may enroll in a rebate program at your utility. Then we have behavior modification programs, demand response, which I talked about, financial incentives and programs. Then a specific segment of those are low income programs, building codes, tax incentives, and energy efficiency resource standards if those are available in your state. So with such a suite of programs that may be available, why doesn't everyone participate? Here are some of the reasons that we have found that people are barriers to program participation, such as not knowing about the programs or how to even enroll. There are a lot of financial limitations to many of these weatherization retrofits and things that are save money in the long run, but have a lot of cost upfront, and lack of awareness and training among vendors, builders, etc. In 2020, Florida utilities, the ones that are their demand side management programs are regulated, filed their suite of programs to the Florida Public Service Commission according to the Florida Administrative Code. So here's a list of the approved programs according to the different utilities. And one thing I would like to point out is that there is the home energy audit program that's required by FEECA, which will be talked about later on, and also a conservation demonstration and development segment that is encouraged by the FEECA. But above that, there's not a lot of requirements by FEECA, which will be talked about that with the experts later. Not a lot of requirements in terms of what programs should be offered, what savings are required, and what budgets should be allotted to each program. Just a little bit about pilot programs. Many states call programs that are quote unquote experimental or research type programs. Those are pilots. Programs, these are programs that do not typically have to pass a benefit cost analysis or screening test. They're similar to the conservation demonstration and development projects that they have in Florida. We also have, we see in the Southeast, a lot of income qualified pilot programs. So many people cannot afford energy efficiency upgrades, and which would make a major difference in standard of living. But because being income constrained, they cannot qualify for loans or make these upgrades. And so income qualified programs are very important in that respect. I will not go into the federal programs, but this slide is here for you to look at. A little bit about cost effectiveness testing. So traditionally, these have been the screening tests that utilities use to assess programs and whether they should be used or not. Each one, this list is, I like this chart because it maps out the benefits and the costs accounted for from each test and how each test should be used. What the next presenters will talk more about the rate impact measure test, which is the major test, primary test used here in Florida. And this is modeling the impact of rates that on all customers with the use of the program. So that will be talked about later on by the next presenters. Also, I want to talk about screening tests that can model program performance individually, which is different than if you bundle it as a portfolio. So I guess if you think of bundling your insurance and car and auto, a group of programs may be able to pass a test versus if you examine those, evaluate those programs individually. Then also we have building energy codes and appliance efficiency standards. Past tests are more adept to pass the tests. And in several states, low-income programs are not required to pass screening tests because they are there to achieve policy goals and just have a budget requirement on them. So it has been many years in the making, but a team of experts have developed the National Energy Screening Project, and they started off with the National Standard Practice Manual for Energy Efficiency. But what I want to talk about is the latest development with the National Standard Practice Manual for Distributed Energy Resources that came out in 2020. So the difference between the NSPM for DERs guidance and traditional tests is traditional cost effectiveness tests typically used in the Southeast are not used equitably across all distributed energy resources. They are typically not chosen and applied based on specific state policy goals. But with the NSPM for DERs, this intends to give more context to state policies and provide symmetry when you're measuring cost effectiveness across all DERs. One thing to note is that a jurisdiction-specific test can create consistency across those benefit cost analysis testing, and it applies to entire range of DERs. So a jurisdiction-specific test will evaluate these benefits and costs from the regulatory perspective and is unbiased to DERs and unbiased to other factors. Also to note is that in Arkansas, the stakeholder group parties working collaboratively in 2018 put together a case study to apply the NSPM for DERs to the utilities, and they submitted it to the Arkansas Public Service Commission. So if anybody is interested, I can provide a link to that case study and how it was applied. Now I'm going to transition to the work that we have done at ACEEE, addressing energy burden through energy efficiency, and also I'll finish out with addressing energy burden for climate goals. There's a lot of information that I will be going through. I won't have time to cover everything, but I have provided resources for further exploration at the end. So it is commonly said that the South has the lowest electricity rates, but we have some of the highest bills. Those who are impacted by the high electric bills are low-income households and communities of color. A good framework for examining energy burden is to examine energy insecurity. And here's our definition of energy insecurity. And we also have examined how these disparities are rooted in historical inequities. Even before the pandemic, people were experiencing what we talk about energy insecurity, problems paying bills, making hard decisions, and high disconnection rates. But as was said many times, the pandemic exposed the issues that were already existing. Here we have a map showing those who are experiencing energy burden or paying greater than 6% of their income to energy bills for non-low and middle income households. Let's compare this to who is paying more than 6% of their income if you are considered low and middle income. And we see that there is a stark contrast, especially along what we call the Black Belt in the South. The age of housing stock also determines the structural integrity of the house and whether retrofits can be performed or not. For example, we can see in Florida, green, blue, and purple in that pie chart, which are big pieces of the pie. This means that the majority of houses were built between 1940 and 1999. In the South, we also have a large amount of manufactured homes in our region. And you can definitely see that in Florida. And this can increase energy burden and lead to barriers to energy retrofits. Here are some of the barriers we've seen to energy retrofits, especially in the low income households. So as I said, there are structural concerns when you have older housing stock, health and safety concerns with asbestos and lead, not enough funding to support these programs, and also how do we reach renters and make sure that they can get the health and cost benefits from these upgrades. Here we see that energy efficiency can provide significant bill savings, and opportunity for those bill savings can be definitely seen in the Southeast region. All of this was put together by our built environment team, Will Bryan and Maggie Kelly Riggins, working with the Texas Energy Policy Research Institute, and the links are provided for a deeper dive. I will close out with how energy efficiency can achieve climate reduction goals. So many utilities have set carbon reduction goals. And before reducing carbon sources and increasing carbon-free sources, energy efficiency can shrink the total amount needed to reach that goal. And this then makes it easier to achieve 100% renewable goals if that is an option or a requirement. ACEEE has put together a list of recommendations on how to reach climate goals through energy efficiency. And with that, I will hand it over. Thank you all very much.
Thanks so much, Claudette. We're going to turn it over to Charlotte with ACEEE.
Thanks, Katie, and thank you, Claudette, so much for that introduction. That definitely tees it up very nicely for what we're going to talk about with my presentation on specifically Florida utilities and the way that they can provide more comprehensive energy efficiency services for Florida's customers than they're currently doing right now. That there's a lot of potential that's not being accessed within the state of Florida. Can everybody see my slides and hear me all right? All right, excellent. So let's get started. But really quickly, so ACEEE, my organization, we are a nationwide nonprofit focused on research, advocacy, and technical assistance in the field of energy efficiency. I'm out of DC right now, but we do operations in all states around the US, as well as some international work. So very far ranging. Excited to talk about this work specifically. I've done some advocacy work in Florida myself, and so this presentation will be some of our research specific to this state and our recommendations for ways in which Florida stakeholders like yourselves can move the needle forward and bring more energy efficiency to people who need it the most in the state. So I wanted to begin by offering some current context with what's happening in Florida today. So just this month, Florida Power and Light, which is a subsidiary utility owned by NextEra Energy, announced that it plans to eliminate carbon emissions from its fleet and transition to a carbon-free fleet by, I believe, 2045. They describe solar, battery storage, green hydrogen, as well as nuclear as their key components of this plan. But when I was reading through this announcement, something stuck out to me as missing, and that was obviously energy efficiency. Wasn't really there in any of the utilities' messaging around how they're going to reach this very ambitious goal that's going to require a substantial build out, both of new renewable energy generation as well as energy transmission and distribution, all of which will result in higher costs for Florida's energy consumers. The fact that they're not utilizing energy efficiency struck me as a pretty substantial omission. Now, to be clear, Florida Power and Light does offer some customer energy efficiency programs. Claudette actually described a few of them in her presentations. But I should note, I was taking a look at their goals and they don't really have any specific energy efficiency targets or a time frame under which they plan to achieve energy use reduction through efficiency. All that they say in their zero carbon plan is that they will remain committed to investing in cost-effective programs that minimize electric rate impacts. And that last part is really key because the reason that they phrase it like that is because of Florida's reliance on this, the ratepayer impact measure test. Claudette also described that a little bit earlier, and I know that George is going to go into it more in his presentation. I'm going to talk about it a little bit too. It's important, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Claudette gave a great overview of the benefits of energy efficiency. I'm not going to dig in super deep, but I did just want to kind of describe why this is a priority for treating it as more as a utility resource. So for starters, energy efficiency is obviously carbon free. By reducing the energy that you consume, it's basically the same as generating that energy, but on the opposite side of the spectrum. So it's like, you know, if you imagine the entire energy system as a set of balances, it's more removing weight from the demand side than adding weight to the supply side. But it still keeps the system balanced, and it does so without producing harmful greenhouse gas emissions. It also benefits customers directly. The most obvious way is by lowering energy costs and customer energy bills, but it also has some non-energy benefits like improving their comfort level in your home or your business. Energy efficiency has a very low cost if you compare it to a supply side resource. So this is again from a utility perspective. If you're treating energy efficiency like you know, a power plant, and you compare the costs to reduce energy on the customer side to the cost to generate energy on the power plant side, those costs are very favorable in energy efficiency's perspective, and I have a graph on that in a second. Lastly, energy efficiency is a real economic driver. It's actually the largest source of energy jobs in the state of Florida. I have some data on that too. But everybody likes jobs, and these are well-paying jobs as well. So, and they're super local. So definitely something that's appealing no matter where your political affiliation lies. So really quickly on the cost of energy efficiency. So we recently did some research looking at utility portfolios and how much they were spending to save energy through demand side programs. And the results maintained what we've seen in past years, which is that energy efficiency is one of the cheapest forms of energy there is. So this graph shows the levelized cost of saved energy compared to the levelized cost to generate that energy on the supply side through a variety of resources. So you see all the way on the far left, this green bar shows the range of cost for energy efficiency. The average cost to save a megawatt hour of energy for the nation's largest utilities was just $24 per megawatt hour, which was cheaper than the levelized cost for any of these other resources: wind, solar photovoltaic, solar and storage, coal, nuclear, natural gas. All of them are less, they have a range of costs obviously, but energy efficiency remains cheap and reliable compared to some of the supply side resources. Also, energy efficiency is a big driver of jobs. 108,000 jobs in Florida, according to E for the Future in 2021. And so it's the largest energy sector by far. In fact, by a magnitude of 2 than the second largest employer in this field. So clearly it's a priority. If you're, you know, no matter where you're coming at it from, whether it's on a utility perspective, an environmental perspective, or just an economic perspective, energy efficiency makes sense in the state. And I basically summarized that up here. It's low cost, it's carbon free, and it benefits the customers as well as the utilities. So how's Florida actually doing on energy efficiency? One of the things that ACEEE routinely does is we publish these scorecards that evaluate states, utilities, cities, entities around the country in terms of their performance in energy efficiency achievement and energy efficiency policy outcomes. In our 2020 state energy efficiency scorecard, which was the last time we had a ranking, we didn't rank the states in 2021 because of the impacts of COVID would lead to a kind of an unequal year. We did do an update on this in 2021, but essentially Florida is 27th in the nation in terms of its energy efficiency policy. So in the middle of the pack, but it's dropped in the last couple of years from 2019, and its ranking in the middle is largely due to building codes and state government-led initiatives. If we're looking at it from the utility side, it's not as favorable. In fact, it dramatically underperforms when you compare it to other states. We allocated 20 possible points that states could earn through utility energy efficiency policy, and Florida only earned 1.5 out of those points. So that's significantly below the regional and national averages when you focus on the utilities role in energy efficiency. Since utilities are usually the main nexus through which customers will engage with their home energy use, it's really important that they play an active role in delivering efficiency through incentives and education to their customers. And Florida's utilities are unfortunately not really meeting those standards. So digging into that a little bit more, so ACEEE also has a scorecard for utilities as well. We looked at the 52 largest utilities in the US by energy sales and evaluated them on similar metrics, including energy efficiency savings, program diversity, and the enabling policies that exist on the state level for utility efficiency. And what we found in Florida was pretty dire. Out of 52 utilities, keep in mind, we had 3 Florida utilities that ranked and that were eligible for evaluation, and all of them were really, really underperforming. So TECO was the highest ranked at 46 out of 52. Duke, Florida was 48th, and Florida Power and Light 51st out of the 52 largest utilities in terms of its energy efficiency portfolio. That's well, I can't really mince words here. It's not a great look. Granted, this was based on data from 2018. It's possible it's evolved since then, but given that Florida hasn't changed a lot of the underlying policies yet that led to these to this performance, I'm not sure how well they'll turn out in the next edition of the scorecard, which will be released next year. So let's look at the numbers. I don't just want to make these claims without substance. So let's talk about how Florida's utilities are actually doing in terms of energy savings. This graph shows energy efficiency savings as a percentage of the total sales that the utility did in that calendar year. So this is, in this case, this is in 2018. And so we see a lot of Florida utilities, not just the ones that were in the utility scorecard, and looking at how much energy they were saving for their customers in that year through energy efficiency programs and investments. And as you can see, it's not great. The South, so all of the utilities on the left side are ranked. And you can see that the Florida average savings for energy efficiency was just 0.17% of total sales in the year. Compare that to the Southeast region as a whole, the average is is much higher than Florida. So I think, as Claudette said, Florida's kind of putting a finger on the scale and bringing down the region as average as a whole. And the US national average is much higher than that at 1% per year in terms of energy savings. The reason why these numbers are pretty low is kind of reflected in terms of spending. Florida's utilities really aren't investing in energy efficiency for their customers. This is energy efficiency spending as a percentage of the total revenue that the utility made that year. And we can see that, again, on average, Florida utilities were only spending like 0.5% of their total revenue on energy efficiency for their customers. This is compared to 1.6% per year on the Southeast side, and then 2.5% in the national average side. So there's just not a lot of money going into this, and there's not a lot of savings resulting from it in Florida, which leaves customers in the lurch and deprives them of cost-effective clean energy. So what's actually holding Florida utilities back? Important question. The number one thing that Claudette has talked about, I'm talking about, and that George will go into an even deeper dive for, is the cost effectiveness screening practice that Florida still relies on to this day. You've heard of the rate impact measure test. What that test does is it evaluates the impact of a given program on the kilowatt hour rates that a customer pays on their bill. If a program will, on average, increase the rate of electricity, then it does not pass the ratepayer impact measure test. On its own, not objectively bad, but relying on it solely is a very outdated practice. Most other states have really stopped relying on the RIM test as a primary cost effectiveness test. They might use it as a supplementary test or something to provide additional information on program cost effectiveness, but it's not the only screen that they're using to evaluate these programs. More common practices include the utility cost test, or which evaluates costs from a utility standpoint, or the total resource cost test, or a combination of several, or a custom test. It really depends on the needs of the state and the priorities of the policymakers when they're crafting their evaluation practices. Important to note here, the RIM test in Florida only applies to the utility's efficiency investments. It doesn't apply to its supply side investments. If they were to apply it to, say, the decision to construct a new natural gas plant, or even or like a new nuclear power plant, those all increase rates. None of those would pass the RIM test. The fact that the RIM test is solely being applied to energy efficiency means it's basically unjustly penalizing efficiency investments in comparison to other types of energy supply side investments. And Claudette already called this out in her presentation, but the National Standard Practice Manual contains a lot of best practices for cost effectiveness testing. Multiple states have adopted that and referenced it in their regulatory decisions with regards to their cost effectiveness best practices. So that's where I would indicate people to look to in terms of crafting a cost effectiveness test that best serves the interests of customers in Florida. There's a few other things that are in the way of Florida expanding its energy efficiency portfolio. One is its reliance on a 2-year payback screen. What that means is that if there is an energy efficiency measure, say a light bulb, for instance, that returns on its investment in less than 2 years, so you buy a light bulb and within 2 years it pays for itself, Florida will not permit utilities to incentivize that measure. You might think, why? That sounds like a very practical and very easy way to achieve energy savings, and you'd be correct. The reason that they're doing this is because of something called free ridership, which is basically the logic behind this screen is that if something pays for itself in such a short time, then customers should just automatically be able to, they'll do that on their own. They don't need a utility incentive to do it. But as Claudette mentioned, there are multiple barriers in place beyond simply cost that prevent customers from investing in energy efficiency on their own. They might not have the upfront capital for it, for example, or they might just not be aware that this is something that they can do. There's lots of ways in which the utility energy efficiency programs in particular can help bridge the barrier and help customers access some very cost-effective and fast-acting clean energy efficiency solutions, but those are all being screened out through this 2-year payback screen. Again, just like the RIM test, this is not a standard practice. No other state, in fact, uses this 2-year screen. To the extent that states do restrict free ridership, they're usually basing it on real market data or using other methods to address this. This is overly restrictive and not an effective way to address the issue. Lastly, Florida hasn't really set very strong goals for its utilities to achieve savings through customer side programs. We saw this with NextEra's clean energy plan. They didn't really have any sort of explicit goals for reducing demand on the customer side through energy efficiency. They only had vague goals and unspecific commitments. We find at ACEEE that specific commitments to reduce energy consumption through efficiency on the utility side really help to drive investment and produce meaningful results through efficiency investments and solutions. And having accountability in this system is really key when you're talking about things that affect all ratepayers. So that's why we recommend more substantial goals that are tied to accountability and public reporting. And as we saw, in terms of Florida goals, and George is going to dive into this a lot more, but Florida had some goals set in like 2012, 2014 era timeframe, but since then there hasn't really been a robust goal setting practice, which is actually what triggered the latest review of Florida's goals and efficiency standards. So basically the energy savings that Florida utilities have been achieving has been declining pretty steadily over the last decade. And without some meaningful reform on the regulatory side, I'm not sure that there's any evidence that this trend will change unless we make the effort to change it. So what do we got to do? Well, fortunately, all of these recommendations can be achieved through regulatory and PUC actions. And in fact, the upcoming docket that George is going to talk about is a great opportunity to push forward with some of these reforms. One of them is to set strong energy savings targets. I already talked about why that's a big deal. And it makes sense too, to have, even if it's just a target, to have something for the utilities to aim for is really critical, because that way they can design portfolios of programs to reach that goal. The second is to align cost effectiveness screening with industry standard practices, stopping the sole reliance on the RIM test and adopting more egalitarian approaches to cost effectiveness screening would be an important approach. It would be a valuable step to take in that regard. Eliminating the 2-year payback again is important to allow the utilities to begin offering more cost-effective measures to their customers with a quick payback period that delivers savings and benefits right away. And lastly, Florida can develop more comprehensive programs that serve underserved customers, low-income customers, non-English speaking customers, customers who rent instead of own their homes, the wide variety of customers who might not have access to traditional energy efficiency also deserve to benefit from it. So those are all things that Florida's utilities, regulators, and decision makers can do that are practical, nonpartisan, and honestly pretty achievable. So that's in summary what the role of Florida's utilities in this regard. We have a more detailed white paper on this topic if you'd like to dive into it. There's a link to that on the screen that came out last January, last year. Yeah, happy to answer any questions about that after this presentation. So that about wraps it up.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. I'm going to ask George to bring his slides up. So you've heard what is energy efficiency, what do the programs look like, technologies, trends in the Southeast, why it's beneficial to customers to reduce energy burden. From the utility perspective, it's a least cost resources. Jobs, I like Charlotte said jobs, everybody likes jobs. Least cost resource, high paying jobs. And then Charlotte laid out how poorly Florida is doing on that front, in particular the Florida utilities. So I hope the case has been made that this isn't, this is important. There are benefits to resolving this issue, and so we'll ask George to share his presentation. So this portion of the last presentation will be, what are you going to do about it? There's an opportunity upcoming that George is going to talk to us about, so we'll walk through this upcoming opportunity on the FEECA docket that's been mentioned before. George, we're going to spotlight you and take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you, Claudette, and thank you, Charlotte, for setting me up perfectly to sort of bring this home. So I am the Florida Director and Energy Policy Attorney for Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. Southern Alliance for Clean Energy is a regional nonprofit clean energy organization that advocates for equitable and responsible energy choices and ensure safe, clean, and healthy communities in the Southeast, including Florida. I have represented the organization before the Florida Public Service Commission fairly often and have engaged in 3 goal-setting proceedings. So look forward to sharing some of my personal experiences at the commission. So let's see. Okay, there we go. You've heard a lot about the benefits of energy efficiency and using energy smarter. It's got a number of benefits for the utility system. It reduces the fuel use. It defers the need for future power plants. In addition, it helps customers reduce their energy use and save money on their bills. I like to use the phrase that it's the quickest, cleanest, and cheapest way to meet our demand, as well as our climate goals, by the way. And that has been acknowledged by the Florida legislature. They have acknowledged sort of the benefits of using energy smarter in order to protect the health, the prosperity, and general welfare of the state and its citizens. And while that statement is, compelling as it relates to using energy smarter, that intent statement, the way it has played out in practice leaves something to be desired, and we'll talk about that and why that's happening. But first, just a little bit about setting and meeting goals. So The goals are set for the state's investor-owned, and these are energy efficiency. Well, we'll talk about the goals, but the goals are set for the state's investor-owned utilities and largest municipal utilities. Okay, and they're set by the Florida Public Service Commission. That's the agency that regulates the state's largest utilities. Now, the conservation goals are proposed by the utility to the commission. They're not actually proposed by the commission. And they're based on potential studies that each utility does to see sort of how much energy efficiency or any energy savings potential they have, as well as demand reduction potential they have. And the goals are set every 5 years for a 10-year period by the Public Service Commission. So there will be another goal setting proceeding in 2024, and they will set goals from 2025 to 2034. And then once the goals are set, the utilities have to file programs to implement the goals. So it's really a two-step process. You set the goals, and then you get the programs approved that are going to implement the goals. And the utilities also have to file annual reports to report on their progress. So let's take a look at who these utilities are. They are the state's largest investor-owned utilities: Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, Tampa Electric. It includes the two largest municipal utilities in Florida, JEA and Orlando Utilities Commission. And it also includes a very small investor-owned utility that a lot of people don't know about, called Florida Public Utilities Company. And I'll also note that Gulf Power has since been integrated into the FPL system. FPL's parent Nextera bought Gulf Power, and those two systems are fully integrated now. But if you look at the total electricity sales that are generated by these utilities, it's 84% of the state's energy sales. So there is vast potential in Florida to really make a difference in terms of utility economic benefits, but also to customers, to really help millions of customers reduce their energy use and save money on their bills. So the goals are set by the Florida Public Service Commission. I like to say it's the most important agency that you've never heard of. They're appointed to 4-year terms by the governor, and that list is provided to them by a legislative committee, the PSC Nominating Council, it's called. And they've got several duties. They set customer rates. That might be perhaps their most important duty, because you got to understand we have vertically integrated utilities in the South and in Florida, where they own the generation, the transmission, the distribution, and the meter on your home. And they are monopoly utilities, and absent any regulation, they would probably charge you monopolistic rates. So the commission is really here to balance the interest of both the utility and the customers. And I think one of their most important duties is to set energy efficiency goals for the state's largest utilities. So let's just look at it sort of a timeline for context. So FEECA was adopted in 1980. And oddly enough, they operated without a rule to sort of implement the goal setting process, but they did adopt one in 1993. And in 2008, the statute was significantly amended. And what I don't have there in that timeline was there was a gubernatorial election in Florida in 2006. Charlie Crist was elected governor. He wanted to leave a clean energy legacy. So he instituted a number of executive orders related to cap and trade and renewable electricity goals. And he worked with the legislature at that time to pass an omnibus energy bill in 2008. And part of that bill was updating the cost effectiveness test guidance for the commission, because up until then, they had been using, as you've heard, the rate impact measure test. This measure is so flawed on so many levels, but I guess the biggest flaw really is that it measures when it assesses the costs and benefits of a measure, it includes lost revenue by the utility as a cost of the efficiency measure. It's not of cost. That is actually the whole idea of an efficiency measure, is to reduce energy use and save money on bills. So it's really a kind of a perverse cost effectiveness test. And a lot of people may not know this, but in 2008, the commission was also charged with promoting demand side renewables, which are essentially rooftop solar. And yeah, and we're currently in a rulemaking. And the commission is revisiting the rule that it adopted in 1993. So it's a real opportunity to modernize practices and setting goals in Florida, because like Charlotte and Claudette pointed out, the practices we use are simply not standard industry practice in setting goals. You can kind of see where Florida is on the charts here in terms of energy savings. Not only are they below the U.S. average, but also the Southeast utility average. Again, that's because of this reliance on the rate impact measure test, this 2-year free rider screen. If you want to look and see sort of individual utility performance and who's dragging down the Florida average, it's pretty obvious when you've got the largest utility in the state that generates over half the electricity sales in the state, kind of pursuing very weak energy savings goals. It drags down the rest of the state. And that's not to say that the other utilities are doing a lot better, but certainly it doesn't help when the largest utility in the state isn't doing its part to lower bills. So this is kind of where the rubber really meets the road. And so I wanted to talk just a little bit about the potential study that the utilities do, because this is sort of at the heart of each goal setting process and the process they go through to propose goals. So first of all, you've got a technical component to it. What is the technical potential that we can that we can do? So before every 5-year goal setting proceeding, the utilities will contract with a consultant and to do a technical potential analysis. And the technical potential represents the amount of energy savings and demand reductions that are technically feasible without regard to cost or customer acceptance or cost effectiveness tests or real world constraints. So it's really a theoretical construct that kind of is a starting point for the rest of the process. So technical potential begins with a comprehensive list of measures that are technically feasible to implement, and each measure has costs and also savings attributes associated with it. And in 2019, the technical potential analysis included 278 unique measures. Okay, and then the utilities move to the economic analysis of it. And this is where the problems really start. And so economic potential is the amount of technical potential that's determined to be cost effective by applying the commission approved cost effectiveness test. And the default, of course, has been the rate impact test generally, and also the use of this 2-year payback screen. And as you heard before, no other state uses the rate impact measure test as its primary test for setting goals, nor does it use a 2-year payback screen to address so-called free ridership. And I guess I would add that the economic part of and also the achievable are places in the study that can be manipulated in terms of data and information that they produce. So it's really important for organizations that want to engage in this process every 5 years, certainly to engage at a very minimum in submitting comments, but if you can, it's also important to intervene in these proceedings, get yourself a lawyer, retain an expert, and propound discovery on the utility and find out exactly how they're doing their economic screening. Yeah, that's really important to engage in the process in that way. And I would say that each utility does the economic screening just a little bit different from the next one. And then if that isn't enough, then they go to achievable modeling. And this is where they try to sort of model how many folks will adopt the measure. They add an incentive to it, and typically these incentives are very low. And then they also sort of use as a baseline the adoption rate of previous programs. So if you've already got weak goals and you're using a model that uses sort of the adoption rate from earlier weak goals that you've proposed, it's not going to, the model is not going to prove out or produce robust results. And let me just give you an example here. I pulled the results for Gulf Power from the 2019 goal setting process. So they started out with 2,568 gigawatts of technical potential. And then they applied the RIM and the total resource cost test to it. You can see that the RIM test drove the potential down to 114 gigawatt hours. And then they did an achievable potential, and they came up with 6 gigawatt hours. That was potential. They actually submitted a goal of 0, which is a long story. But so RIM drove down the achievable potential to 0.2% of what they started with in terms of technical potential. And you can see that the total resource cost tests are about 40 times higher. So again, huge potential here to really help customers reduce energy use and save money on bills. Just real quick, some highlights from past proceedings. 2009 was really the first proceeding since the amendment of FEECA, and there was a lot of discussion on the legal interpretation of the language. Clean energy groups argued that it meant that the commission had to use a more expansive test, like the total resource cost test. The utilities came back and said, no, it actually means that we need to continue using the rate impact measure test. And clean energy advocates rebutted that with, well, why would the legislature change the language if they wanted you to keep doing the same thing? So at the end of the process, so remember, this is 2009, where we have commissioners that are appointed by the governor and were of like mind with the current governor at that time, and they significantly increased the utility goals. The utilities proposed a RIM-based goal. The commission said, no, we're going to set goals using the total resource cost test. Oh, and by the way, also add back the 10 top performing energy efficiency measures that you removed from the 2-year payback screen. So needless to say, the utilities were not happy. And because this was the first year that they also had to set goals for demand side renewables, they also created a rooftop solar rebate program to promote that. 2014 was a completely different story. We had a different commission makeup. The utilities came in and proposed slashing goals by almost 90%. They used low fossil gas fuel prices at the time, state building codes, appliance standards, the sort of reasons to do it. And they also argued that the solar rebate program should be discontinued because it wasn't cost effective. And the commission pretty much granted them everything they wanted. So 2019, we definitely saw trouble coming, because if they slashed the goals in 2014, really gutted the goals in 2014. In 2019, they were coming in and just they wanted to bury energy efficiency permanently. And you can really see that by the goals that were proposed. Gulf, JEA, OUC all proposed 0 energy savings goals. FPL was almost 0. That is not a comma, that is a decimal point. That is 1.023 gigawatt hour. for a company that has over 5 million customers. You can see that Tampa Electric actually was the only utility that increased their goals, proposed goals. And but what happened is, it was a bridge too far for Commissioner Brown at the time. She just couldn't bring herself to vote to support these goals. She said it was like running a marathon. You're never going to reach the finish line if you're running 0 miles per hour. So she put forth a motion to keep the 2014 goals in place, and it was adopted by the rest of the commissioners. A few folks, alluded to the rulemaking process that is going on right now. It was started last year. Boy, it has really been a long process. We are about 2 years into it. We had 2 workshops in 2021. I think the clean energy community really had a great showing, brought a lot of technical expertise to those workshops, as well as community voices. The process was paused for about 6 months late last year, but we expected to be starting again shortly in a few weeks. And look, this rule hasn't been revisited in almost 30 years. We know that a lot has changed since 1983, right? Young kids were listening to the Backstreet Boys on their Sony Walkman. Times change, technologies change, and the commission's policies should change as well. So it's a real opportunity to bring Florida into the 21st century on using energy smarter. And we've a coalition of groups has developed a campaign, a public-facing campaign to engage in the rulemaking process and perhaps beyond. It's called Energy Smart Florida. I encourage you to visit the website, energysmartfl.com. We've got a diverse set of supportive voices on the website. We've got community-based groups. We've got small businesses, big businesses, health voices, environmental and clean energy groups. We have gotten over 6,000 comments to the commission so far. So I definitely encourage you to visit the website, get engaged, have your voice heard, because we need to move away from the rate impact measure test. We need to move away from the 2-year payback before the next goal setting cycle. Thanks so much.
Thank you again, George. That's an amazing presentation. And I want to offer that we're going to share these slides with everyone that is registered, and then we'll also post it on the South Face website in a zip file that you can, package that you can download. Plenty of useful resources at the end of those 3 presentations. And we also have a link to a drive with a bunch of FEECA related reports, many of them from ACEEE and SEIA and SACE. I will add that the ACEEE state scorecard that Charlotte mentioned is one of my favorite reads every year, and would encourage anyone interested in energy efficiency to check that out. Okay, I hope that folks are getting ready for questions. We're going to stop recording now.